In the days to come, the mount of the Eternal's house shall stand firm above the mountains and tower above the hills, and all the nations shall gaze on it with joy. And the many people shall go and say, "Come, let us go up to the mount of the Eternal, to the house of the God of Jacob, that the Eternal One may instruct us in God's ways, and that we may walk in God's paths. For instruction shall come forth from Zion, the word of the Eternal from Jerusalem." Thus God will judge among the nations and arbitrate for the many peoples, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares, their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not take up sword against nation. They shall never again train for war. These soaring and renowned words of the prophet Isaiah, also known by the prophet Micah, is a short eschatological poem. It describes Jerusalem as it should and will be, a city of peace, equity, and filled with the divine presence. As the Jewish Study Bible commentary notes, the prophet does not imagine a future without borders or distinct nationalities. International conflicts will still occur, but nations will no longer resolve them through warfare. This morning, as we woke to the continued reality of the Russian invasion of and war on Ukraine, this vision could not feel more distant. As we heard in our prayer for Ukraine written by Rabbi Eli Tikvasera, it is difficult not to feel helpless, hopeless, but that despair is the deepest friend of tyrants. We begin to see that diversity and difference, disagreement and discord are not the enemies of peace and freedom, equality and justice. They are their foundation. However chaotic, however difficult, nations that provide freedom of choice to its citizens, that embrace inclusivity, whilst not always stable as they adapt to change, enable God's creation, humanity, to live free of warfare. We come to realize that power so centralized in the extreme to a single defined group or even an individual holds the highest chance to descend and resort to military means to maintain the order that benefits only them. As simple citizens, we are realizing that the way of our nation is not that of war. At least in our minds, we have been beating the thought of using our weaponry in war into plowshares and pruning hooks. Thus, we are stunned and shocked, surprised and saddened to witness on our screens a country utterly dominated by one man's will to destroy the lives of so many with the use of force. It is also clear that the leaders of our country and that of its allies are either ill-prepared to act in the short term or have made the decision to progress our planet towards peacefulness by not acting militarily. As Czech and Slovakiophiles, we are all too aware of the comparison with the suppression of the Spring Revolution. Are we leaving our friends in Ukraine as sitting ducks, if not to be slaughtered, then condemning them to life under an oppressive regime? If one is to work towards the long-term good of the world, Perhaps there is the reality that at some point you do not use military force and model that another, a better way is possible. Is it possible at this moment? This morning we ask ourselves that question. Despite Rabbi Alex Duchovny's thanks to our government, UK government last night, in his greeting that came from a shelter underneath Kyiv, we may question the efficacy of our response. Certainly one of my friends, Sasha, in Lviv, questions that as she wrote to me. But when we say never again, this is not just words, it is an act. Otherwise it doesn't work. Hearing this cry from your friend, it's hard to refrain from calling for military action. Easy for us to talk of long-term, non-violent resolution of conflict when one sits in fear beneath the ground, hoping, praying that their shelter is a Sukkot Shalom, one that will preserve their life. Currently, our country and those seeking not to present a single individual, the president of Russia, with the gift he so wants, the excuse to begin World War III, seems to be pursuing a non-military response. We can only maintain our contact, sending our messages and prayers to our friends and twin communities of Lutsk and Lviv. They live out the trauma that we feel in our hearts and minds. We can but be together and pray that the wisdom of our many leaders will defeat that of an evil tyrant. Then perhaps we can follow the advice of the poet Yehuda Amichai. Don't stop after beating the swords into plowshares. Don't stop. Go on beating and make musical instruments out of them. Whoever wants to make war again will have to turn them into plowshares first. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, nor ever again shall they train for war. Let us hope it is God's will. Amen.